Boston temple, and she's actively involved, lives in the Dallas community and actively involved there, doing many, many different services and inspiring all the wonderful devotees there. So thank you so much, and over to Jai Shri Radha. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you. I'm honored to host today's session. And while I'm excited to get started, I'm also sad that this is the final session of this wonderful weekend, depicting the life and times of my beloved spiritual master, His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami. It's been an ecstatic weekend filled with so much nectar so far. We've heard from Giriraj Swami, Jayapataka Swami, Bhakti Gauda Narayan Swami, Hridayananda Swami, Krishna Kshetra Swami, Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami, Lokanath Swami, Ekachakra Prabhu and his wife Jahnava Devi, Rati Manjari Devi Dasi, Vaishaka Devi Dasi, Malati Devi Dasi, Gurudas Prabhu, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. And we've heard stories about the development of the Houston temple and community from Shamasundar Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu and Maturnath Prabhu took us on a tour of Dallas Temple and shared stories about Goswami Maharaj. We also heard from various disciples of Tamal Krishna Goswami. All sessions are recorded and are available for playback on Facebook. The Facebook page is TKG Nectar Drops. This session also will be, I'm sure, and I'm sure as soon as the admins are able, they'll upload it to YouTube as well. And the channel there is TKG Nectar. So if you're not already subscribed to that channel, please do so. So that brings us into our final session today. We're going to start with His Holiness Satsvarupa Das Goswami, and then we'll have Mahatma Prabhu and Jahnava Devi Dasi speak, and then Hridayananda das Goswami will speak. And then finally, we will conclude with Sacinandana Swami. If you have any questions at any time for the guest speakers, please type them in the chat. You can send them to me privately if you like, and if time permits, I'll ask them. Thank you. So let's get started. We already have His Holiness Satsvarupa Das Goswami is already on. He's a writer, artist, and spiritual master in our line, the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. He's one of the first disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, having met him in 1966 and receiving an initiation soon thereafter. He then began typing for Srila Prabhupada and writing articles for Back to Godhead. During his life, Satsvarupa Maharaj has written hundreds of books in the form of essays, diaries, poems, journals, presenting devoted fans with both fictional and non-fictional material. Most notably, he's written the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, as well as the 5-volume Prabhupada Nectar books. He also further writes about Srila Prabhupada's life in He Lives Forever, with Srila Prabhupada in the early days, and Life with the Perfect Master. He found a philosophy of to not deny and hide, but to bring out and accept. And he strives for authenticity in everything that he does, which inspires and encourages many people as they seek out self-realization. In 2010, he created a website which allowed him to publish daily excerpts of his writings and share his current realizations of what life in the fast lane to Krishna is really like. His different approach to exploring our spiritual dimension has proven successful for many on the spiritual path to Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada with Lilamrita was the first book that I've read on Srila Prabhupada's life. And the Little Red Nectar books were pretty much a lifesaver for me while I was studying. They were like refreshing little drops that I could indulge in to take a break because they were quick, easy, and fun to read. And yesterday we heard how he also was at the Dallas Temple, I think in the early 80s. I'm not sure exactly the time, but maybe you might explain a little bit more about that. And we heard about how he became very attached to the Chota Radha Kalachandji deities and took them with him when he left Dallas. And then they were finally returned to us. And I can totally understand why he was so attached to them. I get to dress them regularly, and they're truly very wonderful. And they guide me in so many of my difficult decisions that I have to make. So without further ado, I'm honored and pleased to present to you His Holiness Satsvarupa Das Goswami.
Thank you, Jayashree. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Good. Go ahead.
Remembering Tamal Krishna Goswami. I did not have much contact with His Holiness while he was GBC of India. I would meet him in India for the GBC meetings, and we got acquainted. Then once he came back to America to head up the bus parties, I developed a close relationship with him. And that went on until he went back to college. Then he didn't travel to the places where we used to meet, and he was absorbed in his studies. Before that, we used to meet privately wherever we were, in Vrindavan, Mayapur, and he would come to see me annually at Gitanagari, and I would make visits to Dallas. We would meet, just the two of us, and I would make up an agenda of what to talk about. We would reveal our minds and talk about the state of our sadhana and how to improve it. He also gave me managerial advice. For example, he suggested I form a Gitanagari traveling party to go out and sell paintings to increase our much needed income. We remembered Prabhupada talked about writing projects and our spiritual aspirations. I spoke about my favorite personal stories of being with Swamiji in 1966. And he told me his experience of being GBC of all of India. He said Prabhupada was the actual GBC for India. He made the final decisions. Once TKG set up a table and chair in the Calcutta temple to do his GBC business. Prabhupada noticed it and immediately dismantled the little office. He was GBC, but he didn't even have a chair to sit on. The other GBCs around the world had offices, office chairs, privileges, and he didn't have a chair to sit on. It was nectar, but it was austere, serving under Prabhupada. In our private talks, he also told me about the last year with Srila Prabhupada. when he was so ill and how he took him to England. When they got back from England, Prabhupada complimented him and said, "You have taken a bag of bones to England and back. I'm very much obligated to you." Some devotees called TKG, quote, hot tamale, unquote, because he could have a hot temper and reprimand a devotee with a show of anger. But he was never that way with me. He was always gentle and friendly. We had this close relationship where we would have meetings for years. But at one point, through writing for myself and personal introspection, I decided I want to be more of my own man. Because when we met, Tamal Krishna Maharaj always made the final conclusions and decisions about the subject matter we were talking about. So the next time we had a private meeting, I told him, I want to be my own man. I don't want you to decide on everything. Then he said, well, then we can't be friends anymore. That developed a little glitch in our relationship, but we adjusted it and became friends again. The Gita Nagari deities, Radha Damodar, were originally in the possession of Vishnu Jan Swami and Tamal Krishna Maharaj on their bus. Finally, they were installed on the altar of Gita Nagi for a more stable base. Later, TKG donated after he arranged for carving of two murtis of Lalita and Vishaka. He donated them to the Gita Nagari temple, and they stand on the side of Radha Damodar. Tamal Krishna Maharaj said they were so beautiful that he was sorry that after carving them, they broke the mold. For 3 years, TKG, myself, and a very few godbrothers explored topics of Rasika Bhakti. It grew controversial, and the GBC ordered us to stop. We also saw ourselves that we were imbibing things that Prabhupada didn't teach. But during the time we were reading the books of the Goswamis and discussing them, I formed an intimate bond with TKG. I received the news of his sudden passing away with grief. I cried profusely, which I hadn't even done when Prabhupada passed away, which I was present for. I had expected that once he finished his PhD, which he had actually done, that we would resume our normal relationship. Our active relationship. But now he was gone in his vapu, and the best friend was lost. But we have his Vani. His network of loving disciples and well-wishers, such as those who have created this memorial meeting. And we have his wonderful recorded lectures. Just last month, I associated with TKG by listening for hours to his VIHE seminar on the glories of Vrindavan. He would read a verse from Hridayananda Saraswati's Vrindavan Mahimantra and then discuss it. He was very learned and expert in talking about the glories of Vrindavan. For example, he told a pastime from the Chaitanya Charitamrita of a debate between Srivas Pandit and Swarup Damodar. Srivas Pandit was enamored with Krishna's opulence in Dwarka, where he had 16,000 palaces and so many wives. And he derided to Swarup Damodar the place of Vrindavan Dham. He said it's just a place of some sticks and grass and humble cowherds people. Then Swarup Damodar said back to him, "You don't know the glories of Vrindavan. There the ground is full of touchstones, and there are innumerable gopis who are the most beautiful women in the world, and they have the most exciting relationship with Krishna because of the Parakriya Rasa. In so many ways, Swarup Damodar defeated Srivas Pandit about the comparative glories of Vrindavan and Dwarka. He was Tamal Krishna Maharaj was very sharp on these topics. But this is a lecture from very long ago. And at that time in his career, he was a world preacher. He very much emphasized book distribution. He even said the intense single-mindedness and dedication of the gopis for Krishna is similar to the single-minded dedication of the book distributors. He made this comparison several times. I found these lectures very enlivening, and I felt close to him. As for the Texas zone, I was the prime one to buy the property in Texas at Dallas, the buildings, the current buildings. I dealt with the realtors and the owners, and with Prabhupada's permission and a loan from the BBT, we purchased the buildings. We were operating there, and I was very attached to Radhakalachandji. We had 100 children as students in the Gurukula, but eventually we got bad press and criticism in a film that was made on TV, and the government came down and made restrictions on us to improve the building in very costly ways. When Prabhupada heard of it, he wrote back and said, "Why don't you move the Gurukul to Vrindavan? There you will have no interference, and we have a big building that they can use." So very soon after that, the Gurukul closed in Dallas, and a good portion of the 100 students moved to Vrindavan. So now we had big buildings, but no big project. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had a GBC zone of not much size. For example, he was GBC of St. Louis. He phoned me and frankly asked me to let him take over the Texas zone as GBC. I was reluctant, but I knew that he was a better manager than I was, and that he could make better improvements in Dallas and Houston than I was able to do. So he arranged for what was a corporate takeover. I was so attached to little Radhakalachandji as well as big Radhakalachandji that as a parting move, I kidnapped little Radhakalachandji and brought them to the new zone that I was given. which was Gita Nagari and Baltimore. Not a very strong zone for collecting money. So, as a parting gesture, I took little Radhakalachandji with me and put them on the altar at Gitanagari. Tamal Krishna Maharaj didn't say anything for about a year. Then he wrote me a letter and said, I acknowledge that you had a personal pastime with little Radhakalachandji, but now you should return them to Dallas. However, I kept them at Gitanagari, and I sent him $1,500 and said, you can buy new deities with this. And so they stayed at Gitanagari for about 20 years. Then Gitanagari became so reduced in manpower that they admitted they couldn't properly worship little Radha Kanachandji along with Radha Damodar and the other deities. So Dallas devotees very happily took them back and installed them in their proper home, where Jai Sri Radha is worshiping them every day. I don't regret what I did, but I'm happy they're home, where they're cared for with love. I think I'll stop here and take questions.
I just want to say that I don't know what your health situation is like, but maybe after COVID lockdown is over, you can come to Dallas to visit Chota Radha Kalachandji. I'm sure they will very much appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
I had a question about when they returned to Dallas, and that was in 2010.
Yes. That's when they were returned.
So do you know if we have time for questions, or are we ready for the next?
Go on. Yeah, get me.
If you have some questions.
Maybe we can take one or two questions.
All right, one or two.
One or two. And then Mahatma Prabhu and his good wife are ready for the next session.
Okay, if they're ready, they can get ready to go.
Okay, so then let's go ahead and have Mahatma and Jahnava join us. And thank you so much, Maharaj. I really appreciated your talk, and you were so right. The present is so full here. I know that there's not a moment that I don't feel my guru here, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so attached to this community. Is I can walk outside my house and I have God brothers and God sisters all around me. And, you know, his presence is very much still there at the temple, in the temple room.
That's wonderful. So Mahatma can speak now.
Yes. All right. So I am honored and pleased once again to introduce Mahatma, His Grace Mahatma Prabhu, and his wife, Her Grace Jahnava Devi Dasi. Mahatma was born in Los Angeles, California in 1950. In 1969, at the age of 19, he first met Srila Prabhupada through the book, The Bhagavad Gita as It Is, and then later that year met Srila Prabhupada personally in Los Angeles. In January of 1970, he moved into the temple in Berkeley, California, and shortly after received first and second initiation. He went on to do a variety of services, including book distribution, Sankirtan leader, temple president, college preaching, congregational development, and various educational projects. Mahatma Prabhu is well known in ISKCON for his recorded and live music, most notably his recording of Brahma Samhita. And I also know him for just other like kirtan recordings, but also for his workshops on such essential topics as japa, forgiveness, humility, vows, and marriage. He is an initiating ISKCON guru and has disciples from many countries around the world. Although he knew of Goswami Maharaj for many years, they really formed a relationship and deeper connection when Mahatma Prabhu moved to Dallas in 1992. When he was younger, he used to surf and still loves being on the beach. He is now based in Alachua, Florida. He lives with his wife, Jahnava Devi Dasi, and daughter, Brajasundari Devi, and travels about 4 months a year. Her Grace Jahnava Dasi joined the New York Temple in 1989. Her services have included book distribution and college preaching, managing 26 2nd Avenue, teaching Shastra in Vrindavan and Mayapur, and coaching and counseling devotees. She is also the producer of the award-winning film Women of Bhakti. She holds certifications as a life coach and marriage counselor. And although her life's passion is counseling couples and facilitating workshops on healthy relationships, in addition to being a mother and wife, some part of her would probably like to be recluse in the mountains and just enjoying her own time. They've both had a tremendous impact on my Krishna consciousness. Although I'd been coming to the temple my whole life, I don't think I would have taken it to the next level and become a devotee separate from my parents if it wasn't for their efforts prompting me to make the commitment of initiation. Jahnava was one of the first devotees I friended, and I'm not talking Facebook friend, I'm talking about real life friend. It was through her and her actions that I met Tamal Krishna Goswami. Mahatma and Jahnava nurtured my Krishna consciousness early on, especially with that little house right off of campus in Austin. I don't know if you remember it, on Red River. I am forever in your debt. So it is my great honor to introduce you guys. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Ti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sannivadi Paschatya Dasatarine. So I'm just overcoming bronchitis, so we're going to see how long I can speak without coughing too much. And then we have a more qualified devotee here who has deeper attachment to Tamal Krishna Maharaj than I have, who's very capable of speaking about him. I wanted to thank the organizers. When I first found out about this, I thought, yes, there's so many younger devotees do not know Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and that would be such a loss for them not to know him and hear about him. Secondly, after a person leaves, sometimes the memory fades. And he's too important a personality who is, by his example and teachings, taught so much that to lose that memory is a great loss. So I'm happy that we're keeping his memory alive, and I always find it an honor to be able to speak about him. So, Satsvarupa Maharaj, I found that story really funny when Maharaj said, well, if you don't do what I say, we can't be friends. I think that kind of typified his nature in the early days. My first experience with him maybe was something similar, not exactly the same, but similar. He came with Vishnu Jahnava Swami to San Diego in 1974. And prior to that, he had been in India. So I had no connection with him but we knew who he was. We heard about him. And then he came. And so a number of us were in the office, president's office, doing our work. And he walks in and he says, you all have to get out. I have to make a phone call. And he said it kind of like a general, it was like the first thing that I ever heard him say. It was like, but we heard like he was hot tamale. And then we got personal experience with the first thing he told us. I was like, oh, okay, everyone's right. Yeah. And after that, my relationship with him was as the enemy, because I was the Sankirtan leader in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles was the prime competitor for Radha Damodar. As someone told last night, he would, he was always, how much money did they give me? He was like, had his spies. He had to give more money to the BBT. He had to beat Rameshwar. And I was the Sankirtan leader, so I was on the other side, But he, after the marathon, he came. And everything was nice, battle was over, friendly. And that famous picture where Prabhupada is laughing and I'm right in the middle laughing, and Rameshwar is there, and Hridayananda is there, Trivikram Swami. That was Prabhupada talking about the competitiveness of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He made a joke about him. And Rameshwar was glorifying Hridayananda Maharaj and his book distribution in South America, and how books were going all over South America to places where we don't have temples. Devotees have never been, because devotees are meeting people who are traveling and distributing so many books. And as Rameshwar was speaking, Prabhupada said, this was right after the competition, Prabhupada said, don't speak so loudly, Tamal will have a heart attack. And everyone just started busting up, So Prabhupada liked to play with him. So after that was like 76. After that, I really didn't have much connection until I joined Krishna Fest with Gunagrai Maharaj. And Gunagrai Maharaj was close to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So I had joined him. We were in DC for the summer. And then he invited Tamal Krishna Maharaj out. And I really never, on a daily basis, interacted with him. So he came because he liked what Maharaj was doing, and he wanted to encourage him. So he came out on the mall, saw what we were doing, and chanted with us and so forth. But he didn't feel the temple was being managed well. And this was like really the first, you could say, second real interaction, another startling one. We were in the room, the guest room that they gave him. And he said, this temple is not managed well. You been there like a half an hour, just kind of can feel it, And then he said, I cannot sleep properly in a temple that's not managed well. It's like, okay, my second interaction with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he's not like everyone else I know. So shortly after that, Gunagrai Maharaj and the Krishna Fest party moved to Dallas, and that's when we started having regular interactions with him. And but specifically, we became close in the late 90s because we were spending half our time in India, and when we'd come back to America, we came back to Dallas, we'd rent an apartment, and we'd interact with him. And then we finally went to Austin, which was still in the zone, and then we decided to settle down and buy a house in 2000 and move there. And I think that's when we had most of the interaction. So I was thinking maybe to tell a few things that I learned by observing him that were significant, or just things that I felt were important, stood out, made an impression upon me. One of the things I think we're all challenged with is to see things going on in ISKCON in ways we feel they wouldn't be approved by Prabhupada, etc. And it's hard to watch that sometimes and not be disturbed by it. And especially, I have experience, I've been a temple president 4 times. And sometimes it's very difficult to go back to the temple you were in charge of and see things being mismanaged, especially if you worked hard on it. So the time that I spent with him, he was no longer GBC. And we know that management runs in his veins, but at this point, he's not managing. And so sometimes he would talk about management. You know, he'd say, they're doing this and they're doing that, but that's not going to work, and they should be doing this and that, and, you know, they need more senior devotees to help them. He would make like his commentary off the cuff. And I could see that what he was saying was spot on, could solve the problems, but no one in the management, at least the North American GBC, was thinking like he was thinking. So he would make these comments, and I'd be thinking, you had such a big position as manager. Now you have no position. And you're making these comments, and after you make them, you just go on to the next thing like nothing happened, like you're completely detached from it, which was something that I had difficulty with, you know, being involved with something and then watching it degrade. It was very difficult for me. And he was making all his comments, they should do this, they should do that, and completely detached, knowing that they're not going to do it, knowing that no one's going to ask him, no one's going to call him up, and even if he says something, not that anybody would necessarily listen. And this just stood out. It stood out that he totally detached. He complete, you know, management running in his veins, now not managing, and just like, okay, detached. Another interesting incident happened, and I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but found this interesting. I was in Houston. Gunagrai Maharaj and I were in Houston, and Hanumat Prasheka Swami, he was visiting there. He preaches there. And he came, and so I think he was just there a day or two. And one day we had lunch. So I think at that time, the way Maharaj lived, like everything he owned was in like a little book bag. You know, he was very renowned sannyasi. He had, still to this day, maybe now he has 2 book bags. He's increased. But he had nothing. He just lived as a real sannyasi. And one day we took breakfast, and after breakfast, Hanumat Prasad left. And Maharaj turned to me and Guru Maharaj and he said, I would love to live like that, like him. This is real sannyasis, but I can't live that way. It's not my nature, but I so much appreciate and respect that utter renunciation. And one time, after his rooms in Dallas, I guess they were refurbished, and there was beautiful furniture in there, and paintings, and bed, and desk, you know. He brought me in. He said, I want to show you my room. And it was strange why he wanted to show me, because as soon as I came in, he was like apologizing for it. He said, you know, I'm not sannyasi, and I really shouldn't live like this. He said, but I have to live like this because I go through so much austerity in managing. And if I don't have this, I can't do it. So I totally understood it. It made sense to me. But he was like apologizing, like, you know, I'm a sannyasi, I should. So he really had that, you know, deep renounced spirit within him. But circumstantially, because of his nature and situation, it didn't always manifest. Then one time we were sitting in his room, and he had a little notepad he kept in his pocket, right? Notepad and pen. You remember that? So he pulled it out, and he was like writing something down. And he said, you know, people have so many devices to manage. And he goes, this is how I managed my little book here. This is how he managed his whole zone with a little notebook in his pocket and a pen. He was that good. I'll say one last thing because I want to give my wife time to speak. But there's one thing that was important for me that I found I could do with him that it was really a little bit difficult to do with other people. And this was at the time he was going to university, and I would often talk to him about controversial topics, aka heretical topics, perhaps. Topics that could be seen maybe ISKCON-wise, politically incorrect, taboo, you don't talk about them. But like questioning, was Prabhupada ever wrong when he said something? Is Prabhupada responsible for things going wrong in ISKCON? Things that just, I wouldn't say I was thinking inoffensively. I was just thinking about them. Like I wanted someone to talk to them about it. And he was so free and open to talk about it. And without any editing, just talk about it openly. And it was so healthy for me to be able to talk openly about so many things, so many mistakes we all had made, and how things could have been done differently, and controversy. And then he said, what's the big deal? Every religion goes through this. Every religion has these controversies. Why are the devotees getting, so worried about it? To him, it became like a non-issue. And I just love being able to talk about those things. And the last thing, because spiritual life is unlimited, you can have two last things, right? And the last thing is being able to go to someone when there's some controversy going on and there's some siddhanta that's like really deep and difficult to understand, or just having a personal issue in life, to be able to just go to someone and know that this person has such insight into human nature, such vast intelligence, such a grasp of the philosophy, to be able to have access to that person, which he gave me whenever I wanted, was such a gift. And then when I would think about it, I would think, this is one of the greatest gifts I have in my life, because if there's ever a situation I'm in and I'm just not sure how to deal with it, I can just go to him and pretty much he can figure it out, as we all know, in about 10 seconds. Isn't it? He meets somebody, 10 seconds later, he's figured out their whole life. Oh, I think you should do this and do that. We all saw that. It was like a gift, it was like mystical. And so I always relished that. And when he left, that was probably for me the biggest shock, because I thought, well, who else is there? Is there anybody like that? And I couldn't think of anyone like that I had that much faith in. So I want to give at least time to my wife, who had, I would like to say something about my wife and her relationship with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was in Texas. When you think of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, well, maybe now you think of Texas and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. But when I met Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I didn't think of Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Texas. I thought Tamal Krishna Maharaj, New York, San Francisco, and Texas, completely out of place. That's how I thought, And I don't know if you ever thought that or felt that, but he definitely felt it. Because when my wife moved to Dallas, he was like, yes, a New Yorker. And he always he said, I like to hang out with you because you're from New York and I can relate to you. So he really had this bond with her, New York, because how many New Yorkers were there in Dallas? And Dallas is so different from New York. So maybe she can talk about that. She has her own experience. True.
Can I see your watch? Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. I feel very humbled by seeing all of the luminaries on this screen and sitting next to one as well. So I think many people that I'm looking at are way more qualified to be speaking about Tamal Krishna Goswami, Srila Gurudev, but somehow I'm here. So I will do my duty and do my best. And stop me when it's 12, okay?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 8 minutes.
8 minutes, yeah. So I met Tamal Krishna Maharaj for the first time in the New York Temple in 1989. I was a very new devotee, and it was really a big deal that he was coming, and he had quite a few disciples there, and it was the Sunday feast, and there were lots and lots of people, and he was giving a lecture, and as Krishna would arrange, there was one gentleman there. I don't know if I should call him a gentleman, but there was one man there who really had the mood of stump the guru. So he kept asking Maharaj, this question, that question, all the questions surrounded around the different types of living entities that there are, the eternally liberated souls, the eternally conditioned souls, and all the different kinds of souls in between, and what happens this and what happens that. And he just wanted these kinds of definitive answers, but they were so challenging. So finally, Maharaj just said, look, if Krishna wants to make you disappear, he can. And I don't think anybody had ever heard that aspect of the philosophy before. So you could hear a pin drop. Like the man stopped. He had nothing left to say. Everybody just looked at each other. The class just ended. And we all just stood up. All the devotees were just trying to marvel over that concept of, and I think he said he could. He won't, but he could. If he wanted to, he could. So we were marveling over the idea that if Krishna wanted to make us disappear, he could. And that was a long time ago. I never forgot it. It's remained a very profound moment in my life, as it was the first time I met him. Now, during that visit, there were some girls in the ashram who were his disciples, and they would go in for the darshan with him, and then they would come back into the ashram. And they all came back sort of transformed. Some would be crying, oh, he read my heart. And others would be like, oh, it was just so intense. He really, got to me and, he cleaned my heart. They all had these very profound transformations. So I was thinking, this personality, who is he? He's very powerful. He's not ordinary. He's really affecting people in profound ways. And I just will never remember that. And he used to never forget that. And he used to come back a few other times. And every time he came to the temple while I was living in it, it was a powerful experience. And eventually I got to meet him and talk with him and serve him. And I can't go into it all because we have such little time. But fast forward, after about a year and a half of serving at the 26 Second Avenue Temple and running all the programs, this was about in 92, 93, it just became apparent that my time in New York had come to an end. And my initiating spiritual master, His Holiness Hridayananda das Swami, and I were discussing, what should I do next? And he felt that I should go to Dallas and take shelter of Tamal Krishna Goswami, be under his care and his disciples' care. And I'd never been to Dallas before. I'd never been to Texas. So somehow I took the leap of faith. I packed a little suitcase, and Hridayananda Swami bought me a one-way ticket to Dallas, and I got on the plane and I landed, and I just thought, here we go. Okay, what is in store for me? So when I arrived at the temple, I was greeted to my room in the ashram, and then the devotees took me up into the building where Tamal Krishna Goswami stayed. And Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu, who's also a Prabhupada disciple, which I didn't realize at the time, led me into Tamal Krishna Goswami's room, his bedroom. And it was a beautiful room, very elegant but simple, and the lighting was beautiful. And I don't want to sound too far-fetched, but there was like an aura in the room and even around Maharaj. And I went in there and he invited me to sit down in a chair. And then this devotee comes in with these long stemmed crystal wine glasses and pours me fresh pressed watermelon juice and Maharaj. And so I'm sipping watermelon juice out of these beautiful goblets with Tamal Krishna Goswami. And I just came from an ashram in New York where I slept on a hard bed and it was very austere. And now here I am. The contrast was incredible. And he was trying to encourage me. He was trying to make me feel welcome and make me feel appreciated and make me feel like I had something to do and something of value to offer. And that's why he did all of that, so that I would feel loved and welcomed and appreciated. And so we could talk about, what can I do here? So it was a very grand welcome, and I always appreciated it. Now, the next morning during japa, Tamal Krishna Goswami would sit in the temple for about half of japa period, and then he would go up to his room. So he left, and then one of the devotees came down and said, Gurudev wants to see you. So I went upstairs, and again, I went into his room, and he had this table set up with all these pictures of all the different holy places of Vrindavan. And at that time in his sadhana, he was going on Vrindavan Parikrama while he was chanting japa. So he took me on Parikrama with him, and we sat there and we would chant and look at this holy place and that holy place and go deeply into japa. And again, a gift, a real cherished gift that again made me feel important and special and appreciated and valued. And then one more little thing about that time in Dallas. So previously to running Second Avenue, I had been a book distributor in the airport, and I used to go to different parking lots and festivals and places like that, traveling a bit. So all the devotees there went out on book distribution to the airport. So of course it was expected that I would go too. And I was very nervous. I hadn't distributed books in quite a few years, and it was a new airport and new people, and you get rusty, right? When you don't use it, you lose it. So I was in that space of not feeling that I owned it anymore. And anyway, so it was a real struggle. I distributed 7 little books and collected $11, which for anybody that knows the spectrum of book distribution, good, bad, terrible, great, that was on the spectrum between terrible and bad. But when we got back to the temple the next morning, when they announced the scores and then they announced mine, Maharaj said, wow, that's fantastic. Can you believe it? It was her first day in the Dallas airport. 7 small books, $11. And he, made it seem like I had distributed sets of books and won the lottery. It was so beautiful. Okay, we're finished. Yeah, so I had more I wanted to share, but I feel honored and blessed that I could share any of it. And I will just say in closing that since the day, okay, let me say it this way. My life is eternally blessed that I had the opportunity to meet Tamal Krishna Goswami, to interact with him, to serve him. I've got his blessings in so many ways. And the day that he left this world, for me, was the day that the world, and I could even say my life, just got a little bit darker. And I struggle with that every day. I guess if I was very advanced, I could figure out how to feel his presence in separation and serve him in separation. And I haven't gotten there yet. So I think of him practically every day. I dream of him constantly. And he is present in that way, but I truly felt like he was my best friend. I hope that doesn't sound offensive in any way, but we had this inexplicable kind of connection and link and bond, and I miss that. I miss that tremendously, and I pray to have it again one day in a spiritual form. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. And thank you both. And you're right, Jahnava. that you had a special bond with him. I remember how he would be towards you and how you would be after you would see him. You definitely had a very unique and special bond. And it was different than from my perspective as his disciple. And so, yes, thank you so much for sharing your heartfelt stories. Really, they were wonderful to listen to. So, Hare Krishna. So next we have His Holiness Hridayananda das Goswami. In 1969, he attended a campus lecture delivered by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, after which he began studying the philosophical literature of Prabhupada's movement. And in September 1969, he joined Berkeley ISKCON Center. In 1970, he was formally initiated into the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Prabhupada strongly encouraged him to present Krishna consciousness in a rational manner to educated people, and also to ultimately focus on establishing Krishna consciousness in North America. He has spent his life doing just that and has so many accomplishments. I'm only going to name a few. He served as president of Bhakti Yoga Centers in Gainesville, Florida, and Houston, and lectured on university campuses throughout North America, and he continues to do that throughout the world now. He opened dozens of Bhakti Yoga Centers in over a dozen countries in Latin America and organized the leading publishing house of Indian spiritual literature in Spanish and Portuguese. Together with a team, he completed Prabhupada's epic translation and commentary on the Bhagavad Purana. He received his PhD in Sanskrit and Indian studies at Harvard University in 1996. He's published articles with Harvard University Press, University of California Press, and Columbia University Press. And recently he published his dissertation as the 91st volume of the prestigious Harvard Oriental series. He's taught at the Graduate Theological Union and the University of Florida. He published his popular complete guide to the Bhagavad Gita with literal translation and Quest for Justice, an explanation of the epic Mahabharata. He's fluent in 7 languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, French, German, and Sanskrit. And around 2013, His Holiness established Krishna West to help facilitate ISKCON's outreach to Western audiences. Krishna West has now centers throughout North and South America and Europe. He was a good friend of Tamal Krishna Goswami. Goswami Maharaj valued his advice and opinions, and His Holiness Hridayananda Maharaj considers his Goswami Maharaj a wonderful and beloved older brother. They would have heated discussions for fun, like the infamous peanut butter and jelly sandwich debate, which maybe, Maharaj, you might talk a little bit about. And I know that he is very appreciative and feels very honored to be speaking about Goswami Maharaj. So without much further ado, I present to you His Holiness Hridayananda das Goswami.
Hare Krishna. Good morning, Jai Sri Radhe. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Maharaj. Good morning.
It's also nice to hear from my old friend Mahatma and Jahnava, of course. I really appreciate that. Both very eloquent. Where to begin? I've told these stories many times, but maybe I'll just go rapidly over them. My, stories I always tell about Tamal Krishna Goswami. And Satsvarupa Das Goswami, is he there? Satsvarupa, one of my great old friends, and one of the great servants of Prabhupada, actually, in the history of ISKCON. So I first met Tamal Krishna Goswami when I visited the Los Angeles Temple in La Cienega Boulevard in the summer of '69, and I used to drive over there with my mother's green Dodge Dart, and I used to. They had a Sankirtan van. They go out every night. It was an amazing Harinam program they had in LA then. It was like one of the wonders of the world. I mean, they were so enthusiastic. Tamal Krishna, by the way, was a temple commander. And in those days, the temple commander was not the temple gopher. In those days, the word commander meant what it means to everybody else outside the Hare Krishna movement. He was the temple commander. It's sort of like being the prime minister of India as opposed to the president of India. So the temple president, Hridayananda, was sort of like he dealt with external affairs, like, you know, the public, but Tamal Krishna actually ran the temple. And so they would go on Sankirtan all day and Harinam, and they would leave a few devotees behind. Tamal Krishna really kind of invented the modern Sankirtan movement in some ways. I mean, Prabhupada went to Tompkins Square Park. Prabhupada obviously is the founder, but Tamal Krishna kind of made it into an army. And I remember that, and so you had this dynamic pair. Tamal Krishna would organize everything, and of course the Sankirtan leader was Vishnu Jana. They're both brahmacharis, and it was so disciplined, it was so serious that they would go out after breakfast, stay out until they come back for lunch, sort of mid-afternoon, then go out again in the evening. And they had this big Sankirtan van that was, I can see it now. It would slowly pull out of the driveway, back out of the driveway onto Los Cienega Boulevard. And if you got left behind, it was sort of like the Christian sense, you know, left behind, like, you know, you're going to suffer the apocalypse or something. So as the Sankirtan van was backing out with the side doors open, I can still see it, devotees running and diving into the van. It was like military thing, you know, like, and other devotees would grab their arms and pull them into the van as it was moving. The van wouldn't stop. And then Tamal Krishna, he with him and Vishnu Jan, everything was super organized, dancing in step. Tamal Krishna really was the first person to seriously organize literature distribution. There was serious literature distribution, and he was also the first devotee to chastise me, as I've said many times. I was visiting. I was this, you know, young kid, student at Berkeley, living in Beverly Hills. So I was kind of like, okay, let's try to cultivate this person. And then I was sitting one time, Tamal Krishna, I've said this many times, was the closer. He was always like it's like, you know, the Rat Pack, you know, Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, all those people. He was like Frank. He was the head of the Rat Pack. He was always like the chairman of the board. And so he sat down next to me. He was the closer, like at a car sales place, you know, like person really closes the deal. So he sat next to me and said, "So you like this Krishna consciousness?" I said, "Yes." "So you think you're going to join?" "Yes." "You're going to join here in Los Angeles?" "No." My family was there. I wanted to go to Berkeley, so I wouldn't be like, you know, just attacked by everyone in my family. So he said, what did he say? "That's duality." That was the wrong answer. He was really unhappy that I wasn't going to join in LA. But anyway, the next time I saw him, I did join the Berkeley Temple. I'll never forget. I don't know if Mahatma was there. Mahatma, were you in Berkeley when they had the West Coast regional meeting of temple presidents? Maybe that was before you joined.
Probably before I joined.
Yeah, that was soon after I joined. That was in '69. So Tamal Krishna was the like the regional secretary. They didn't have a GBC. There was no GBC then. So he was in charge of the West Coast from Vancouver, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, down to San Francisco, Berkeley, and Los Angeles. That was the West Coast. So he came there, and he, of course, headed the meeting. I didn't go to the meeting. I was just a new brahmachari. But I'll never forget, in those days, it was so ecstatic. We would attend Artik in the morning. Before Artik, we would sing Bhaja Bhakata, and then Kiba Jaya, and so on. And Tamal Krishna was leading the kirtan, and the way he was dancing with like the Swami step with big strides, and he was like he really was like a commander. He even danced like a commander. And I remember watching him and just being so impressed that this person is a powerful Vaishnava and a leader. So then I remember we would get news that, so Tamal Krishna really sort of started a book Sankirtan, like organized Harinam in more of a really systematic, practical, dynamic way, not just going and sitting down in the park. And then Prabhupada sent him to Europe. He went to London and he organized things there. And then he went to Europe and organized things there. And I was just a brahmachari in Berkeley, but we would get news. In those days, of course, there was no internet. There was no, ISKCON temples didn't make long distance phone calls. I mean, in general, the culture there, only rich people made long distance phone calls. So we would get letters. And I remember letters like Tamal Krishna doing all these dynamic things in the UK. Tamal Krishna went to Europe and he's organizing Europe. And then when Prabhupada went to India, Prabhupada's glorious return to India in 1970 as a conquering hero. And then he made Tamal Krishna GBC of India. He was wherever Tamal Krishna went, he was the leader. So we would read about him. He was Prabhupada's right-hand man in India. And then another thing, Tamal Krishna, he actually inspired me to take sannyas. He sort of planted the bug or the seed in my mind, because I was a temple president in Houston in 1971, a Grihasta, actually the correct pronunciation of the Sanskrit vowel R. So you can be the only person in your country to pronounce Sanskrit properly. So anyway, I was a Grihasta, and I got news. In those days, I think Shama Sundar was Prabhupada's secretary, but in those days, whoever was Prabhupada's secretary would write the news. This is what Prabhupada is doing. And literally they would send snail mail to all the temples in ISKCON, whether by that time there were 30 or 40 or 50 temples. And so as a temple president, I would get regular just mail, paper mail, typed out of what Prabhupada was doing. And so I remember, I think it was very early 1971, we received the Prabhupada news, and it included the fact that Tamal Krishna had taken sannyas. And this news electrified me for the simple reason that he was the first Grihasta that took sannyas. Up to then, and I was a Grihasta, and so it definitely contaminated me with that idea. And so I remember I was sort of thrilled that, oh my God, a householder can take sannyas. So that truly inspired me. And I'm trying to think, when's the next time I actually saw him? It's interesting that when Tamal Krishna took sannyas, Prabhupada had him step down, or up actually, as GBC of India, because Prabhupada was thinking to do things in a more traditional way, that since Tamal Krishna was now sannyas, he wouldn't manage. He wouldn't be a manager as GBC, but no one else could do it. And so after a short time, Prabhupada saw that this is not working. And so he put Tamal Krishna back in as a sannyasi. So anyway, I mean, there's so many things that we did become friends. Tamal Krishna Goswami, I think when I became a GBC, Prabhupada actually called me to to his room and asked me to be GBC of Latin America. And it was very successful. And I think at that point, my relationship with Tamal Krishna Goswami became more intimate, because it's kind of like, hey, the kid's doing okay. So he thought, when he saw that I was also doing the kinds of things he had done, on a sort of on a similar scale. Hey, there's Ritubaja Swami, one of the most interesting living entities currently on this planet. So when I became a GVC and things went very well, he kind of accepted me. It was like, accepted me at a certain level. And he was always like my younger brother, because I was a second of four brothers. And so for me, it was very natural to have an older brother, and he was older than me, and he was senior to me in almost every way. Well, actually, I'd say in every way, in terms of joining the movement and becoming a leader and what he had done. And so it was like a really happy relationship. And well, since Jahnava started it, I will follow up on her. She opened the door here. She mentioned that there's like, sort of like an ethnic thing with Tamal Krishna, Jewish girl from New York. And so I mean, somehow or other, I was from California. Somehow Jewish people from New York, like my age, always seemed to like me because I was like they kind of had this protective attitude toward me, sort of spaced out from the West Coast suburbs. And, they were kind of like streetwise and everything, and, grew up fighting on the streets of New York. So Tamal Krishna, he really saw me in that sort of in a very affectionate way as a kid brother, but a kid brother that was doing all right. And so, for example, when I would see him in Mayapur, because we didn't see each other that often, we worked in different parts of the world, he liked to wear those kurtas with little ties. And I would say when I'd see him, it was like, Jai Maharaj, Jai Maharaj, I'd go up to him and untie his shirt. I just mentioned that because it was kind of, it really was like brothers. And then Krishna arranged for me to have a family, very nice apartment in Beverly Hills. And so Tamal Krishna would always fly through LA. He would come through LA on the way to China once China was established. So he'd always stay with me. He would always tell me how much he really liked staying there. And so many times I would host him there. I'm just trying to run through all these things quickly. I remember how I did convince him to go back to college. I think that's a well-known story. And I'll just tell the short version because these are like, I Love Lucy reruns. But anyway, when I went back to college, it was a huge scandal in ISKCON because I was a sannyasi, I was a GBC, and I'd actually just gone to a slaughterhouse. Colleges were slaughterhouses, and there was nothing in a university that could be of any value in Krishna consciousness. There was no Yukta Vairagya angle in actually being an educated human being. That was kind of the mood in ISKCON. And of course, Prabhupada, the fact that Prabhupada had encouraged me, encouraged Rabindra Sarup to get our degrees, that was, he was just trying to be nice to us because of our attachments. So anyway, so I went back to college and they formed a special GBC committee to deal with me. Not the only special GBC committee that's been formed to deal with me. Anyway, so I went to the Mayapur meet. I think it was 1992 because I was a GBC. And so they formed this committee, and it was all the heavies. It was TKG, it was Hari Kesh, who was a heavy leader then, and a few others. And so there was a knock on my door in Mayapur, and I opened the door, and it was right out of The Godfather. All these like heavy GBCs. I mean, the only thing missing was the violin cases and the sort of the rose in their lapel. And so I remember, it might have been TKG said, Hridayananda Maharaj, we'd like to talk to you. And so they came in, we were all sitting there talking. And I was really fired up. So I was giving all my arguments, as I always do. This is a little known fact about me, but I sometimes engage in debate. And so I remember after I was making all my points, Tamal Krishna, he looked around at all the other leaders and said, we've got a problem. I can't see a fault in his argument. So Tamal Krishna, I think maybe that was the first time he really, because he was obviously a very rational, no nonsense guy. I mean, among many other qualities. And so he said, I can't find a problem with this. So they decided that as a compromise, that they passed actually an official GBC resolution that Hridayananda Maharaj should open a college in Mayapur. And so I said, well, that's great because I can't do that until I get my degree. So thanks. I'll see you guys soon. And I actually tried, but of course, then no one in India wanted to cooperate. But so anyway, I think the seed was planted in Tamal's mind because he came through again, I guess on his way to China or something, or on the way to somewhere. And he stayed with me in Beverly Hills. And I remember when he arrived and I was, receiving him, and I said to him, I could just tell by his mood because I knew him pretty well. I said, hey, you came here to investigate me, right? Like, see what I'm really up to. And he said, well, that's not the only reason. But he really, but he kind of, like, okay, let's see what the kid brother is doing. Let's, make sure he's not in trouble. What is this? So he stayed with me, and I was just, I was, in those days, I was on my, what do you call it? I was focusing my demagoguery in those days on going back to college as opposed to Krishna West. So anyway, he brought up points, and I started making all my arguments about how ISKCON needs this, and Lord Chaitanya took sannyas so that the public would respect him. And in these days, if you're a sannyasi, people just, wonder about your orientation if you tell them not interested in women. And so I said, if you get, at least in the Western world, so I said that, if you get a degree, you'll be like Lord Chaitanya, the world will respect you and you can preach. And anyway, so he became intrigued. He became so intrigued that he decided, I'm going to take a serious look at this. So he called his mother and asked his mother to bring him all his old high school transcripts. And because in those days, of course, there were no computers, so his mother kept them all, where mothers always kept things in those days, in a shoebox. And so I remember one day there was a knock on the door, and I answered, and it was Tamal's mother. And of course, we received her with great respect. She came in, she had the shoebox with all his academic records. And so I'll never forget this. It was such a happy time. He was, of course, staying in the guest room, and it was, we had wall-to-wall carpeting in the apartment. And so we were both sitting on the floor together, Tamal and I, and we just poured all the papers out on the rug. And we were just sitting there going through things. And he would hold something, and he would say, can I use this? I'd say, yes or no. And this is, we made a pile of the stuff he could use and stuff he couldn't use. I think he had some college credits. Anyway, so then he flew back to Dallas. And before he left, I remember he told me several times before he left, he said, if you get me into your program, you caught the big fish, because I'm going to get a lot of other people into this. He kept saying that. So he went back to Dallas, and about, I don't know, several days later, I got an email, and Tamal said, well, the big fish just jumped off the boat. Because when he went to Dallas, and this is something, Sacinandana Swami, there's a great Vaishnava. So Tamal Krishna wrote to me, he said, the fish just jumped off the boat, because he said that the leaders, his lieutenants, the people he worked with, were telling him, no, go to China, you can't take time off. We need you in China, and we need you in the zone. And one thing I very much respected about Tamal Krishna is that even though he was obviously a heavy leader, everyone knows that, but he was committed to the people he worked with. And even though he might have wanted to go to college, he wouldn't go unless the people under him were happy with it. And so he was committed to them as much as they were committed to him, which in fact, of course, explains a lot about his commitment, about their commitment to him. So I remember what I wrote to him. As soon as I got that, I wrote back to him that I said, I'm not worried at all, because if Krishna wants you to go back to college, you will go. And so that's what I wrote back to him. And then the next time we met, he called Brahmatirtha, because it's very interesting. For the first time in his life, TKG was like the super organizer planner. I think there was never a more efficient, more powerful just manager in ISKCON. And so he used to tell me, he was proud of this. He had his whole year planned out. He knew exactly where he would be on each day, what plane he was taking. He'd have the whole year planned out. He was a super organizer, and he had the most efficient book distribution party in the history of ISKCON with Radha Damodar. And so for the first time ever, he wasn't sure what to do. And of course, that was Krishna. It was obviously just Krishna in his heart. And so he thought maybe he would come and spend time with me and we'd talk. So I had this really nice house in Santa Barbara, just below this beautiful mountain. And there were 4 bedrooms, and with different. So what I mean, I was really anxious for his association. So I took all the brahmacharis. We had a whole group of devotees. I put them all in the garage, which had a carpet in it in the bathroom. It wasn't, I mean, I wasn't being cruel. We put them all out there, and I got a separate place for the ladies because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss this chance. And so I offered TKG, you can have your own office, your own bedroom, your own bathroom. So he came, and we had really happy times together. But here's the point about his studies. When he came, I think the next day, the day he arrived, or the next day, he got a call from China, and the devotee said, "Don't come. The government's cracking down. Don't come to China." And I just said, like, Krishna wants you to go to college. And so he understood it immediately. I mean, he understood immediately that was a sign from Krishna. So I remember he came into my room, and we sat together, and we talked about where he should go to college. And like I was just asking him questions like, do you want to go in America, or do you want to go to Europe? He said, no, America. Okay, do you want, I said, there's two ways to study Vedic culture, either in the arts and sciences, like area studies, like South Asian studies, but then you need more language like Sanskrit, or in religious studies, in which maybe, and so he said religious studies, didn't want to do Asian studies. So then the next question was, okay, where do you want to go? Just want to go to the best college? No, he wanted to be in Texas. He said, that's my home is in Texas. So I said, okay, well, the best, they have a good program. And in Austin, he said, no, I want to be in Dallas. I remember that we kept narrowing it down. He wanted to be in Dallas, and he felt that was like his real home in this world. And so then it was SMU. But anyway, the last thing I'll say, because I know the time is vanishing here, is that the last real, don't send me minute signs, I'll end soon. So the last real the last real meaningful contact we had a few months before Prabhupada and Krishna took him to some other glorious service, he told me that we were going to start talking once a week. And of course, you had to pay for it in those days. And so he said, 1 week, it's my dime. The next week, it's your dime. Those are the rules. So every other week, I had to pay for the call. So, and he said two things to me. He said, and I'll leave you with this. And this was, toward the end of his glorious devotional service in this world. Two things. One was he wanted to work with me. He said that once he finished his PhD, he thought that he and I should work together and establish a powerful program, like a seminary or something. And that's actually what he wanted to do after he left college. And so we were going back and forth and discussing how to do that. So that, of course, I was very honored by that. Then when he finished college, he wanted the two of us to do a program together. And the second thing was, this is something he said to me a few times, which I'll never forget ever in my life. And it meant so much to me because of the history. He said, you are the last person in the world alive that I can actually talk to about certain things. Because the fact that we were, two of the original gurus after Prabhupada, and what that meant, and having to deal with a lot of mythological history about what really happened, and just what it was like to be thrown into that situation. The fact that both of us had built up big, successful zones starting from almost nothing. And so there were certain things that we had both done that, so I remember he said to me a few times that you're the last person that really understands some of the things that I've been through. And so anyway, I'll leave you with that. And thank you very much for the honor of speaking about TKG. And he was, last thing I'll say, before the hook comes out. If you see me being dragged away by a hook, that was a digital device operated by my secretary. Anyway, so yeah, the last thing I'll say is that Tamal Krishna played a unique and very powerful role in history, in the history of this planet. Assuming that ISKCON will revive and there will again be a relevant Western Hare Krishna movement someday. Tamal Krishna was always a leader, there's no other follower of Prabhupada, there's no other disciple of Prabhupada that ever did or probably will ever do again what he did. I mean, he really played a big role in organizing Sankirtan in North America, in Europe, in India, in China. I didn't even mention China. I mean, probably no one else in the world. If I would have gone to China, I could have, easily lasted at least 48 hours there before I took the next plane back. But I mean, Tamal Krishna was probably the only person in the world that could have really opened up China. And so no one else in the history of ISKCON sort of played a major role, in some cases, a, completely dominant role in organizing 4 continents. And so, yeah, his legacy, his contribution is unique. I don't know. I mean, there's no one I can think of that's done what he's done. Even his relationship with Prabhupada, the maturity of his relationship with Prabhupada, I think he loved and understood Prabhupada, certainly in a much more mature way than I did at the time. And so I think in many ways, he's a unique, powerful, and extremely important historical figure, not only in the history of ISKCON, but in the history of the world. And also a great writer. He also mastered the art of Sanskrit dramaturgy. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. That was very interesting and enlightening. And I think everybody definitely has a better idea of who Tamal Krishna Goswami was and the contribution he made to Srila Prabhupada's movement. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
So, we are coming up to our last speaker. Of course, last but not least, we save the best for last in some ways. Of course, like Mahatma said, if we can have spiritual war, we can have 2 lasts and 3 lasts. We have many bests. So His Holiness Sacinandana Swami is a monk in the Bhakti tradition. He's known for his significant contribution to the practice of meditation and kirtan. He's dedicated to the process of inner transformation and has spent 50 years in pursuit of genuine spiritual experiences. With messages full of bhakti, humor, and energy, he reaches thousands while at the same time teaches to each and every individual. In Maharaj's own words, I like to inspire others to come in touch with the divine so that they can live and act from the place of unlimited blissful being. Sacinandana Swami co-founded the Braj Care Charity in India and has been integral in building 2 spiritual communities in Germany. He teaches at the Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education in India and the Bhaktivedanta College in Belgium, and has published several books, dozens of articles, and poems. He is well known for his famous phrase, "My dear devotees," and the sweet way he says it. Sacinandana Swami's kirtans are so sweet, and he sings with so much love and devotion that these feelings transfer to you just by listening to him. I had the pleasure of attending his Living Name retreat in New Vrindavan a couple of years ago, which was transformative, especially to my japa practice. And surprisingly enough, in deepening my japa practice, I was able to deepen my relationship with my spiritual master, Tamal Krishna Goswami. I highly recommend everyone to attend the Holy Name retreats that he holds. Of course, after, COVID times are ended and it's safe to travel. But in the meantime, I know he does them on Facebook as well. So without much further ado, I present to you Sacinandana Swami.
Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Niyavashesha Shunyavari Vaskatyade Satani. My dear devotees, dear Hridayananda Goswami, I have listened to you already for quite some time and was touched by your very dynamic presentation, but also evocative. You could paint a picture of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj with the brush of your words, and we could see him entering the room as he always did, with many ideas, with many well planned out strategies. And this way we are very grateful that you made us mindful and heartful of His Holiness. Thank you very much. Everyone on the call, I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. Needless to say, I feel like a little mosquito amongst elephants, and I hope I will not disturb anyone with my attempts to shed light on Tamal Krishna Goswami from a very personal perspective. That is my own encounters and discussions with him. I'm well aware of Maharaj's great achievements in the history of ISKCON, and yes, beyond that even. I'm also well aware of his tremendous leadership abilities. I know that when we had to book a flight for him, we had directions where he wanted to sit and where he did not want to sit. He was extremely accurate and not at all spaced out. I'm very well aware of his sometimes bold and at times even controversial statements, something which a real leader does. He brings something forward. That means he has to challenge the present comfort zone and in which an institution thinks. I'm well aware of his personal qualities, something which Maharaj mentioned. He was very loving, and yes, would take care of those who were even a little close to him. Yes, and I believe that of all these qualities and more, we have heard during this memory. However, I would love to focus on one particular aspect of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, which I learned to appreciate. The searcher, the one who was on a personal quest, the one who was going into risk zones by exploring something new which was not there before. You do not always know the outcome, and in this way it might be risky. And I would also focus, after having dealt with a little bit about this, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, the searcher, I would like to go into continuing our association with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, a quite mystical, esoteric, spiritual point of view. Don't worry, it will be according to Prabhupada. So, yes. The way I began to appreciate Tamal Krishna Maharaj was when he was in Vrindavan, and he was teaching in the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, courses on Nectar of Devotion, for instance. And he would come a little bit earlier and stay a little bit longer than his teaching. I was one of his students at that time, and after the term was concluded, when we had written our final examinations examination papers and handed them in. He would have meetings in the place where he stayed, where he invited his god brothers to come and discuss very deep questions like how much karma does the guru take of his disciples? Does he take? Then other things, what questions like what does the Gaudiya tradition say about reaching ultimate realizations? What processes are discussed, etc. And I do remember, especially on Ekadasi nights, I was there in consecutive years during Ekadasi, we would really discuss all night, and it was such a, let us say, involved discussion. We spoke without filters, we spoke without editing our speech, because confidentiality is the word, was guaranteed. And we were really, as we say in German, wir rangen die Wahrheit. We wrestled for the truth. These were intense times. We would put positions, we would argue for our positions, and I remember I was once very strong. In my position I had not done what I usually feel appropriate, to be very polite, and because I also don't speak English as my mother tongue, I should not venture into too intellectual, or let us say too complex ideas, to not be misunderstood. I decided, let me discuss. This man wants to discuss. He's interested in truth. And I do remember we discussed really intensely. So much that Maharaj said, you go out of the house. I said, I don't go out of the house. This is a discussion. I think you're defeated. So why do you want to now take to brutal force? That is not acceptable in cultured circles. And, we discussed as friends do. And we met also in Zurich. I did remember we did long walks through the forest, and we discussed sincerely where we are in spiritual life, where we see our challenges. And I was so amazed. I had never seen a leader of such a stature, so above a person like me, who was so absolutely transparent and so absolutely committed to spiritual advancement and to the unadulterated truth. I was aware at that time of a letter which Prabhupada had written, and I found it just recently. He said, Prabhupada said, this material existence is like hard wood. And if you can carve out from this hard wood of material existence, if you can carve out Krishna, that is the success of the human form of life. Carving out means an endeavor, an effort. It means to distinguish what is useful from what is not useful any longer. I remember these long walks, both in Zurich as well as South Germany, where we have our farm, Singhachalam it is called, where he really talked about his thoughts, where he really wanted to know other perspectives, where he was interested to discuss the merits and demerits of the positions, the respective positions. And that was very enjoyable, because that gives love to spiritual life that is true Ishtagosti, so to say. This is how I personally remember Tamal Krishna Maharaj. That was my relationship. I guess because I'm not a great organizer, I'm not a great structured, strategist and so on. I guess he said, well, this person is about these subjects. Let me connect with him on that level and discuss this. I see it as his ability in communication to be flexible and enter the different levels and excel in the different levels. I would like to now read to all of you. This was part 1, now comes part 2. I would like to now see how we could remain connected with Tamal Krishna Maharaj on a spiritual level. I want to address his disciples here who are on this call, and I would like to maybe also put some seeds into the mind of my exalted God brothers, all the well-wishers, who may also think that, okay, he has left. He was a great personality. He was influential in my life. He helped me think thoughts I could not have thought without him. Is it possible to have a relationship with him? I think by ordinary vision, Tamal Krishna Maharaj left us in the year 2002. I hope I am correct. I think our host will know. 2002 is correct, or was it another time?
Yes, 2002, March of 2002.
March of 2002. Since that time, I have gone a few times to Sri Mayapur. I have usually the same driver. We are affectionate to each other. We know each other, in other words. And I always asked him to stop the jeep before that tree. And then I go to that tree and sit under that tree. It's the tree where Maharaj's jeep collided in that fatal drive which he took. And I'm trying to sit there alone. It's not always easy in Bengal. They might come and want to sell you a coconut, but it's not a tree in a village. It's outside of a village. And most of the time, I am alone under that tree. And I think two thoughts, that I will have to leave this world also at a time when I do not know. Maybe my tree is waiting already for me, only time is separating. And I also think about Tamal Krishna Maharaj as a person, as someone who extended his friendship and attention towards me. And many thoughts have been coming under the tree about the idea of separation in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, separation from a Vaishnav. Srila Prabhupada wrote in 1969 about the subject. I will make some sound that it's more pleasant to listen. Our meeting and separation in the material world is like the flowing tide of a river. During the flowing tide of the river, when it goes up, the water, during the flowing tide of the river, so many different floating articles meet together, and with the flowing they again become separated by the movements of the waves. That is the way of material life. But our separation, Prabhupada writes to Brahmananda, no? But our separation, although it resembles exactly in the material way, it is completely different. In the spiritual world, separation is more relishable than meeting. In other words, in spiritual life, there is no separation. Separation is eternal, and meeting is also eternal. The separation is simply another feature of meeting. Amazing. On a river, articles meet by the force of the river, and then they separate. That's usually for good. But Prabhupada says, although our coming together on the spiritual platform resembles this, it's not exactly the same. There is meeting and separation, and there is feeling separation and then meeting on the spiritual platform without embracing the physical form of the person. When we hear this, we feel a little dissatisfied. Whoa, high talk, please, no, be more relevant. It's nice, something spiritual, but it's not within my grip of experience. Tell us, Sacinandana Swami, how can we remain connected? Not a concept, something where we can experience. I will continue with some other quotes. Prabhupada said, please be happy in separation. I am separated from my Guru Maharaj since 1936, but I'm always with him so long I work according to his direction. So we should all work together for satisfying Lord Krishna. And in that way, the feeling of separation will transform into transcendental bliss. Acha, here we get further instructions, further directions. We can in some way meet, apparently, be together, if we work together for satisfying Lord Krishna. This indicates something. There is Tamal Krishna Maharaj who has done tremendous service and who has left something behind him. He has left temples behind him. He has left projects behind him, countries to be developed behind him. And when we, so to say, log into this work, then there is some type of meeting. I would like to give you an example. Today, Krishna, my assistant, he connected with this particular Zoom call. I think he operated a link, and then all of a sudden, whoop, we were in the same call by some connection, this connecting device. In spiritual life, there is also a connecting device where you can be in the same call with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He is a great devotee of the Lord, so we can we can connect with his projects, with his legacy. It will become now very clear how to do this. Prabhupada said, so far I am concerned, I do not factually feel any separation from my spiritual master. No? I do not feel any separation from my spiritual master because I'm trying to serve him according to his desire. That should be the motto. If you kindly try to fulfill my mission for which you have been sent there, that will be our constant association. Mind you, Prabhupada writes this after his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, had left the world in 1936. Prabhupada writes this letter in 1970. That is, I'm not so good at mathematics, 34 years later, 34 years after his disappearance. He says, I'm trying to serve him according to his desire. This should be the motto. If you kindly try to fulfill my mission, for which you have been sent there, that will be our constant association. Srila Prabhupada teaches practically. In the concluding words of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, and very nicely he says, I don't feel separated from my spiritual master. In fact, I see him in my heart. The heart, my dear devotees, is the meeting place where you can meet Tamal Krishna Maharaj. When you travel to these big international airports and you wish to meet the person who has come to pick you up, you can, if he's not so expert to find the gate where you come out, you can say, let us meet at the meeting point. And they usually have a meeting point in the various signs. And then you go there to the meeting point. Sometimes you have to walk for maybe 2 kilometers, or there are just transportations also. But at the meeting point, you can always meet him. There is a meeting point where you can always meet exalted devotees. It's in your heart, this meeting point. And the meeting point can be accessed through the route of service of the mission of that person. My dear devotees, it's inconceivable. Human reason fails to explain sufficiently how you can meet a person who has left the body a decade or 2 decades, almost 2 decades ago. It is inconceivable. But spiritual things are inconceivable. How can we conceive with our mind, for instance, that the holy names, Hare Krishna, is Krishna with his attractive smile and his welcoming gesture? Come, my dear devotee, come. How can you explain how the sound vibration Hare Krishna is identical. It's spiritual and therefore inconceivable. Another inconceivable one. How can you understand and hope to communicate to someone that the deity of Krishna, made out of marble, is Krishna and can speak to you? That is inconceivable. But nevertheless, those who chant, they have revelations of Krishna in the heart. Those who worship the deities, they sometimes hear answers of the deities to their confidential questions. Where? In that same meeting place, the meeting place of the heart. So, I request all of us to not just take this for granted, or not just take this, okay, here's another lesson. We heard so many lessons. Ooh, we are happy when this is over, then we can eat something. No. Try to make an experiment. I made an experiment on this. Actually, an experiment came to me. See, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and myself, we used to discuss on matters regarding spiritual life, our own spiritual mission. And after he had left his body, I had one of these dreams. I should say one thing. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had told me that when I die, I will inform you, and when you die, you should inform me when we are still there. So that was before this dream. So I am there, I believe it was in Italy. I was traveling and preaching in Italy, and I went to sleep in the night, and I was dreaming, and in my dream a couple came, husband and wife, and they had a question. They had heard that I have done seminars on death called There Is No Death, and had given these seminars in universities, and they had heard about it, and they said, Maharaj, this is all in a dream, I have a question. We have a question. Our friend left his body. Where is he now? So I inquired, please tell me more about the circumstances, that maybe it is possible to see from our philosophy some possible answers to your question. Now, as I was engaging with this couple in a discussion about what happens after death, all of a sudden I see next to them Tamal Krishna Maharaj appearing in his saffron dress. It was really like, he came and he sat there and he looked at me. And he looked at me like he always did, very intently. And I said, Maharaj, is it you? And he said, yes. I came to say goodbye. Oh, really? And then that original dream scene vanished like a dream, which vanishes like a candle, which becomes extinguished. All of a sudden it's no longer there. And I was sitting before him. And I said, Maharaj, I'm very, very, very excited. Is it, first of all, is it you? And he said, yes, I told you. And I said, Maharaj, where are you? And he smiled. And he said, at a wonderful place. How is it there? You know, it's almost like someone visits from another country and you want to know, how is it there? So, and he smiled and he said, it's much different than you can imagine. But he was very joyful. He said, I'm very well, and I just wanted to say goodbye. And then he went away, and I was there. I woke up. My dear devotees, if you asked me, do you really believe you saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj after his disappearance? I say, I saw him differently than I saw him with these eyes. So when you believe in these spiritual things, then I will say I saw him. If you don't believe him, I will say, when you don't believe in these things, maybe I did not see him. It is the question of the level in which you define reality. What is reality for you? For me, these levels are also reality. And for I think because there was an affectionate bond between us, in some ways he said goodbye. In some ways. What these some ways are is different for different people. But my main point here is, in some ways you can meet him. In some ways you can be with him. You can be in the memory with him. You can be in the spirit with him by engaging in his projects. And you can maybe also be with him in other ways. In some ways, that's my point. You can be with him, and I think a personality like him deserves that we keep him amongst us, at least in the memory. I want to now look at yes, I still have a little time. Let us see. Here's a dear servant of Srila Prabhupada who has done a lot of preaching, who has opened many projects, who has touched a lot of people in their heart and changed their ways of living. That personality has left us in his physical way, but he has left a legacy, is the English word, I think, something he has left behind. And we are all invited to be there. I remember I was once visiting Dallas. I was looking at the deity. He talked about Shri Kalachandji, Radha Kalachandji. I stayed in his room. I took prasadam there. We were mindful of him. I was with His Holiness Hridayananda Maharaj, and we talked about him. We talked about our memories, and by being mindful about him, we felt his presence, and we profited from his presence. In many ways, we took his lessons to heart, the words he had said, to us, to heart, and it shaped us in some ways. Even now, where I listen to His Holiness Hridayananda Maharaj and heard him speaking about his memories of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I became again more mindful of him, and I was really inspired to hear this. Yes, my dear devotees, this is what I have prepared for you today. I've taken these quotations from letters of Srila Prabhupada, and I have concluded my little address here. Totally untypical. I'm before the time. I think we have still 20 minutes left. So, Jai Shri Radhe, what should we do? Should we maybe go into a question and answer session? Should we maybe ask different devotees to say something? We may have to explore here new ways.
So Maharaj, it's totally up to you, but I have a question that comes to my mind is if you can relate to us your most special memory of an interaction between you and Tamal Krishna Goswami.
Yeah. I have two memories which are similar, standing at the same level. He had come sometimes to Germany to visit our preaching center in Heidelberg and Singhachalam. And at one stage, he came and another very dear friend of his also came, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. So there was Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and myself. Maybe there were other German God brothers. I believe His Holiness Bhakti Vaibhava Maharaj might have also been there. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj, in his usual way, said, "I want to cook for everyone." Then he turned to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and said, "Tamal Krishna Maharaj, what will you have?" And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "Chinese noodles." So then Bhakti Charu Maharaj said, "Then we have to eat tomorrow, because now Chinese noodles are not available, but I will have to organize from a shop that we get these Chinese noodles." So we postponed our meeting to the following day, and we then sat down for a meal of Chinese noodles. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "You might have been questioning why I wanted Chinese noodles." Now he said, "I want to remember that Srila Prabhupada sent me to China. You know, there was this interaction with Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had a very mature relationship with Srila Prabhupada. So they discussed things in an intense way, and he had said, "You might as well send me to China," you know, like saying, you might as well send me to the moon, you know, an improbable place to go. And then Prabhupada called him the next day into his room and said, "Actually, I want you to start our mission in China." So Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, related this particular story over a meal of Chinese noodles. He was very poetic or thoughtful, and he talked about surrendering to the mission of Srila Prabhupada. He went to China which was in his mind equivalent as going to the moon. He took that sacrifice and he did excellently. I think he even wrote a book for the Chinese audience. I have read it. I think it has 2 parts even. I read one of the parts about one Cheng, I believe, who is becoming he's a Chinese and he becomes a preacher in China. And he really surrendered to the mission of Srila Prabhupada. That's my first memory which I wish to relate here. What a real person, you know, what a creative person, what a cultured person, what a surrendered Vaishnava. Another favorite meeting, there are several. Yes. I have a few in mind, so now I'm doing selecting the right thing. And I do remember he was in Vrindavan, as I told you in the beginning of my little talk. And he stayed in Vrindavan, he loved Vrindavan, he taught in the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, and we met outside of the period and of the teaching periods which were there. And once I met him, he was in the garden and he was working on a commentary to the Brahma Samhita. I in fact have still his commentary somewhere. I don't know where it is now, of the Brahma Samhita. It was never printed, but he worked intensely on this. And he wanted to discuss a point of philosophy. And for me, these discussions are all in all, you know. We discussed different points, and then he wanted a particular book which shed further light in a particular point. And I said, Maharaj, I know this book, I know also where to get this book, but you need to we need to have a little time to order it. And I got him this book, and he was so grateful when I supported his research. And I remember I went into the, you know, where his garden was. There was a little door. There was some plants growing over the doorway, and he was there sitting in the garden and really working on this very philosophical book. And I could really see that point of which I really appreciated, someone who took his spiritual life so absolutely serious, who was so absolutely serious. And if you asked me, Jai Sri Radhe, I would like all of us to be mindful of Tamal Krishna Maharaj and do what I did in his presence when I was with him. We would chant in his house. We would do kirtan in his house. I think you all know the time just before he left the planet. He actually organized these huge kirtans in his room in Mayapur. No, there was huge kirtans, long kirtans. This kirtan will only be 15 minutes long, but I really would like us to do this. So please, in my usual style, I request you to sit straight, everyone. Yes, very good. Oh yes, yes, Jai Sri Radhe.
We have about 9 more minutes for questions, and then we would love to have you lead our kirtan.
Aha, 9 more minutes for questions. Good, good, Jai Shri Radhe. Good, you are the host, you should direct us. So let us have 9 more minutes for questions. How will we do it? The questions will maybe come to you and then you will ask them to me, yes? Okay, so everyone, please, you say Jai Shri Radhe, what should we do?
So I already have a few questions here. It might take us to the end of our time. One of the questions that I have is, what can we do to please Tamal Krishna Goswami?
I could not acoustically hear you. Please repeat. What can we do?
To please Tamal Krishna Goswami in the here and now, and today.
Yes, wonderful question. Wonderful question. He had projects which he wished to do for Srila Prabhupada. We all know he started the book distribution on a big way. That was one of the projects at the time when he organized the Radha Damodar temple, the Radha Damodar traveling party. And there are other projects, maybe the Dallas temple. As I told you earlier, I was not so much discussing with him about projects, although yes, of course, I have also, we all older devotees have tried to offer projects to Prabhupada. So you should see where is a space for you in one of his projects. Where is a space where you can fit in to one of his projects, if you are a disciple of you, if you are dear to him. And you should do this service which you identify in the memory of him and to please him. And in that way, you will have a very, very real spiritual connection. Connection you can feel, in other words, you can experience it, it's not just in your mind, and so on. So that is my answer to this question. Find your place in the legacy or in the mission of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj and do your service there.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. I really liked that. So we have a few people that have been sharing their dreams in the vein of similar to the one that you shared, that Gurudev or Tamal Krishna Goswami appeared in their dreams as well. With the same mood of like, I'm still here, I haven't left. And then one person shared that that Goswami Maharaj actually instructed her to take some action that she has been very shy and afraid to do. And so that was a really beautiful dream that she shared. I also have had a few dreams of him coming and giving me instructions, or I've shared this before, but he's come to me one time and he was in the temple room here in Dallas. And, if you know Gurudev, he's got those beautiful blue, twinkling eyes, and he gave me his sweet smile. And I was just like, wow, it's so nice to be in your presence again. And he's like, but what is the question of missing me? You have my dear god brother here. And he pointed to Giriraj Swami. And so when I turned to Giriraj Swami and he was also smiling, I felt that he had not just left, but like left me with guidance and someone to take over for him. But when I turned back, Gurudev was gone. And so I understood that he was passing on the baton, so to speak. So, I think all of us have had very beautiful dreams similar to that. So another question is what we've heard all weekend about the different qualities of Tamal Krishna Goswami. What is one quality that you admire the most and try to embody the most?
Yes, thank you very much. The one quality which really impressed me the most was this, the searcher, not stopping. I think the moment we stop in spiritual life and we stop moving forward in our spiritual life, we stagnate. When we think we know it all, we cannot know more or get to know more. So I really liked this, appreciated his being on the quest. And another thing, on a totally different, if you so want, no, it's not different, but he was extremely determined. I have never seen someone like him who was collecting all his mental energy and then focusing on this, on accomplishing whatever it was that he wished to accomplish. Like he was sent to do things by Srila Prabhupada which maybe others could not have done. Why? Because he was able to focus everything into one direction, and you know, when light, diffuse light, is focused on one ray, it becomes a laser that can cut through steel doors. So that quality of focusing all his mental energies and being a very determined person, that impressed me also very, very much. And I try to imbibe this in my own way.
Thank you very much. So I think we can go ahead and start Kirtan if you would like.
Yeah.
And,
How long should we? I think maybe if we tell a time, then everyone can participate, because we know when I say let's do 2 hours kirtan, then the number of participants will drastically drop to minus 10, you know. So why don't we do like this? If we do 7 minutes kirtan, is that good?
We would prefer if you can do maybe 15-20 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay, I will do. Very good. So please, my dear devotees, this is something very important. It is something where we try to connect with Maharaj. I will guide you a little bit in the beginning. Let me just see, I'm here with...
And also I would request, if you can, go ahead and turn on your camera so that Maharaj can see you and also gain some energy from being able to see you participate in that.
Yeah. Yes. And maybe, Jai Shri Radhe, it's good if you already, as the host, make your final agreement, final statement, or would you like to do it when we end the kirtan?
We'll do it when we end the kirtan.
Okay. Very good. My dear devotees, I would like all of you to center yourself, sit straight, and let us become mindful of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Calm your breath to slow and deep breathing. If you wish, you might like to close your eyes. And let an image of Maharaj arise. Maybe a picture, a photo, a personal meeting. Excellent. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, everybody. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time, everybody, please. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I go. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everybody please. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And last time for everyone.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Vaishnava Thakur, 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 Jaya Vaishnava Thakur. Jaya Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Sri Radhe. Jaya Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Sri Radhe. Jaya Radha Syama Sundar, Radha Syama Sundar, Sri Radhe. Jaya Radha Syama Sundar, Radha Syama Sundar, Sri Radhe.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. During that kirtan, I flashed on a memory of you dancing and jumping up and down in a playful spirit at Sadhu Sangha, and I was missing those times. And I have to say, this time is no different, but there's never been a time where I'm not in one of your kirtans and I'm just moved to tears. So thank you so much for your sweet and kind words about Tamal Krishna Goswami and beautiful kirtan.
I thank you all very, very much. It was a great honor to appear on this talk, to be with such a, let us say, dear devotee, and by becoming mindful of devotees, do you also feel how they somehow appear in the heart? They are there in some ways. And I want to just end my contribution to this with this note. Let us not lose connection with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And in order to keep the connection with him, it's important to keep his legacy alive, to serve his legacy, also to read in his books, maybe, and in this way keep the connection. The worst is to lose connection. I wish you all the best, all of you disciples of Maharaj or well-wishers. I wish that you can stay in the connection. Thank you all very much, and Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada, and Jai His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj Ki Jai. So Jai Shri Radhe, you should say the final word and or usher us out of the Zoom room.
Thank you, Maharaj. It was very wonderful, very sweet. This whole weekend has been so wonderful, and it's almost heartbreaking that it's coming to an end. But the good news is we have the recordings and we can watch it, all the time, every day. We can watch a little bit, hear some of the speakers. And I know the organizers are talking about maybe trying to do something more regularly on this kind of topic, connecting with our beloved Tamal Krishna Goswami, as well as maybe having this a regular thing every year or so. I don't know, maybe I'm volunteering the organizers for something they're not ready for, but I think that would be a great idea. And for the final closing words, I'm going to go ahead and ask Nityananda Prabhu to come back on, the temple president here in Dallas. I would go ahead and let him speak. I feel like there's not much more that I can say, and I don't want to break the mood that Sacinandana Swami has left us with. But I know that we want to take away some of the mercy and the messages that we've learned, and so that we can be more mindful. So I pass the mic on to you, Nityananda Prabhu, to close us out for this weekend.
Thank you so very much, Jai Shri Radhe Prabhu. And thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful words of encouragement to all of us. We're so fortunate to have great devotees like yourself still on the planet, that we may actually feel the presence of Srila Gurudev and other great personalities like Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas through association of great souls like yourself. Thank you so very much. I first wanted to start by apologizing. One of the things that Gurudev had taught me was that in all of the programs that we do, the first most important thing is to take care of guests. And at the temple right now, there are many guests who are coming because we have reopened partially. And they sometimes don't come in the allotted times. And so Gurudev asked that I should always take care of them personally as the president. And so that is why I was not on the programs all the time. But I can promise you I'll be watching the full program, because I know so many nectarians' words were spoken. But every time I was there to hear, all I heard was pure nectar. And I was so gladdened, so enlivened like that. I'll just start with a small prayer. Om Gyanam Timirandhasya Gyanam Janashalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimate Tamal Krishna Goswami Tinamri Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamri Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Deshatarine. So, Hare Krishna. So before I actually thank the organizers of this wonderful, amazingly wonderful program, this truly transcendental program, I would like to recap on something that the organizers had spoken of when this program was being organized and when it was being planned, sorry. And that was that there were devotees, younger devotees who never actually met Srila Gurudev, and they wanted to hear about him. And then they wanted to learn something more about him, so that they can be enthused and encouraged in their own Krishna consciousness, and most importantly, sharing their love of God with others. And so in that regard, I really want to address those persons who actually fall in that category, those devotees, young devotees who actually never met Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, and who may be feeling in their hearts that we wish we were there when Gurudev was here, when Tamal Krishna Maharaj was here on the planet, and we wish we would have met him and seen the same things and heard the same things and experienced the same things that his disciples, his god brothers and god sisters, his well-wishers, as Maharaj said, his friends, those who touched him in any way, like Ronnie Cleaver, who was spoken of so nicely by so many wonderful devotees like that. And I wanted to recall something of wisdom that Radharani actually gave us all. And that comes from the Prema Samputa, where she describes that that the greatest thing in this world is misery. Because what misery does, it makes us cry. And when we cry for Krishna, that is the best way to become fully Krishna conscious. Because Krishna, it's like Prabhupada also said, that the chanting is like the crying of the child for the mother. And so in the same way, crying. So she was describing the 5 major drivers of this misery. What actually causes the greatest misery in this world? And she finishes in the fifth one as unrequited love. Unrequited love means when we express some love but we don't feel like it's been reciprocated well enough, then we feel unhappy about that somebody really didn't care about me, didn't recognize me, something like that makes us feel unhappy. That's called unrequited love. So in the same way, we can turn this love into something that's very powerful in our service. That the fact that we didn't meet Srila Gurudev, that we didn't meet Tamal Krishna Maharaj, is not a disqualification. Actually, it is a qualification rather than a disqualification. The qualification is that now we can focus on his Vani. We can focus on his instructions, his words of advice. And this is what Maharaj was speaking about, and so many of the wonderful speakers who we thank so dearly for coming on this program and giving us their valuable time and sharing their hearts with us of pure love for Tamal Krishna Maharaj, for Krishna, for all of the wonderful devotees, of course, Srila Prabhupada as our Grand Master, like that. And so what happens is, actually, when you don't meet a person, like some of us never met Srila Prabhupada. We met Tamal Krishna Maharaj, but we have not met Srila Prabhupada. But actually, Srila Prabhupada comes in our dreams to us and gives us instructions, speaks to us, tells us what to do, because we love him so dearly. Every day we go to the temple, we see him first. We see Srila Prabhupada sitting on that Vyasasana, and we know he's there. How many times we've heard people come to the temple and said, who is that person sitting on that Vyasasana? He's so disciplined. Look at how well he's sitting, and in that position, and he doesn't change. He's so focused. He must be meditating. And others who say that, I spoke to him and he gave me the answer. I had a problem I wanted to solve. I spoke to him and he spoke to me. Not just gave me the answer, but he spoke to me. I mean, that is amazing to hear that happen. And, so this is the experience we can have when we really, really love someone. And it is because of your love that this program happened. It wasn't the disciples who really asked for this program. It was those who had not met him who asked for this program. And amongst us is an amazing soul, Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu, who is, I can see him on the School of Bhakti webcam right now. And he took it upon himself with some of the others who I will name also, to actually bring this program about so that this will happen. And, people are speaking about dreams and how they had Gurudev come in their dreams. Gurudev actually has even come in person to people. I mean, I personally can tell you of a situation because Jai Shri Radhe so very mercifully decided that she was going to sit in front of the Samadhi and actually speak from there. And, because it's so beautiful to see that Samadhi. It is, it's amazing. It's a gem beyond gems. And those of us who live in Dallas, we're so fortunate that we're able to visit with Gurudev in the Samadhi, see his Samadhi, speak to him personally. But when that Samadhi had just been constructed and we decided that we were going to do the installation ceremony, so Gurudev's flowers can be brought, the flowers from his body can be brought there as a pushpa, Samadhi. There was a lot of controversy. A lot of controversy in the first case just to make the Samadhi. Some people saying, you don't have a right to make a Samadhi in Dallas. The Samadhi should be made in Mayapur and in Govardhan. Why in Dallas? Why is Dallas that? And, but Gurudev spoke in his will and said, that Dallas might be a consideration. He said, if they don't do it anywhere else, do it in Dallas. And so we decided to go ahead, and there was a lot of controversy. And then the question became, how much money can we spend on building this Samadhi? And, this Samadhi cost us around $90,000 to build. And devotees were saying, that is not money well spent. You're wasting money, like that. And the controversy went all the way through the paint on the Samadhi. One of our nice God brothers decided he wanted to paint the Samadhi saffron in color. And that really irked many of us. Many people became so unhappy about that color and said, that is not what Gurudev would have wanted. And currently it came to the color that you see now. It was repainted, so this color. And then even on the day of the installation, there were controversies. Who can go on the top of the Samadhi to bathe the kalashas that are on top of the Samadhi? I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it. Now, everybody can't go on, So who will be allowed to go on? So the people were unhappy. I was not allowed to go on. Why is that person? He's not even a disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he was going on there and doing this, that, and the other. It was controversy, so much controversy. But anyway, we sort of stayed calm and we did the nice program and everything happened nicely. And then I went back home, and at that time I was staying opposite the house that Rupanuga Prabhu is staying in, a yellow house that now Pandava Vijay Prabhu and his family stay in. And so I was very tired because it was a long day all the way from morning. And so I just sat down on the sofa, and basically I wasn't noticing what was happening. Then when I opened my eyes, I saw Gurudev sitting on the sofa on the other side. And I said, can't be possible. I'm dreaming. So I pinched myself. I said, I'm dreaming. And I wasn't dreaming. He was actually personally present there. And he said, you know why I have come? And I said, no, Gurudev, tell me, please. And I was about to pay obeisance. Says, no, don't pay obeisance. Just listen to me. I'm not going to be here for very long. Just listen to me. He said, all the controversies that happen is the sign of all of your love for me. I understand that there was a lot of controversy when Prabhupada left the planet about, how things should be done, whether he should be allowed to circumambulate the hill or not. So you disciples are doing the same thing. You're showing a lot of love to me. I want you to know everything you did was nice. I'm very happy with it. Please be encouraged. Please do not think that if somebody doesn't like what you did and disagrees with what you did, that means you have done the wrong thing. Be apologetic, be humble, but don't actually become discouraged. I don't want you to become discouraged like that. And then he left. Just after that, he left. And I thought to myself, how kind of him to at least make us feel that we did something that he was actually happy with, like that. So this is the type of person that Tamal Krishna Maharaj is. He is a person who really cares for us even now. The Dallas temple is still being run by him, actually. Anybody who comes to Dallas and is in Dallas knows that I'm probably the worst temple president on the planet. I mean, the temple would probably run better if I wasn't the temple president. That's how low I am. It's not me that's running the temple. It is actually Prabhupada sitting in his room up there. Tamal Krishna Maharaj also, and then the deities, and of course the wonderful devotees who are working very hard at the temple. So many wonderful devotees who do so much service, who are working so hard. They're the ones who are actually doing it. And so, but you can feel the presence of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Everybody who comes feels that I still feel his presence. I feel he's still here. He may just turn up, the door may open, and here walks in Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. And who said that? Prabhupada used to say that. Prabhupada used to say that I was expecting to see Krishna at any moment. Just behind the tree, Krishna would appear. Just as I walk in through a building, I would see Krishna there. He was always expecting to see Krishna. Why? Because Krishna's energy is so strong. It is so powerful. And so in the same way, please feel very encouraged that you asked for this program. This program happened. Such a wonderful program, an unbelievably, transcendently ecstatic program happened. And we can see this over and over again and relive this ecstasy. But most importantly, I wanted to speak about what is the best quality of Gurudev that I personally experienced and many of us experienced. And I personally believe that the greatest quality that Gurudev had many qualities, unlimited number of qualities. But each person will be impacted by some quality that they can say, yes, this is my favorite quality in Gurudev. And my favorite quality is of humility. Now, this is not what most people think. Most people don't think Gurudev was a very humble person. Most of us know. I know that every time he spoke to me, he chastised me. Every time I was called, Gurudev wants to see you, my stomach would churn. I would think to myself, oh my God, what sauce am I going to get this time? What did I do wrong this time? Why is he calling me to tell me why I did wrong this time? Like that. So, but at the same time, we should see every situation through the eyes of Scripture. We should not see them through our own eyes because our eyes are incomplete. They are not full, and our ears are not full. But Scripture is complete, and Scripture is full. It is completely perfect. So through Scripture, when you see, the definition of humility is a person who actually preaches very boldly. Prabhupada gave that definition of humility. Humility means to preach very boldly. And all people can agree that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a very, very bold preacher. That he would preach with such conviction that it was obvious that he totally loved his spiritual master, and he totally loved Krishna, and that he loved the devotees, and he loved each and every living entity. How many examples we can give of Gurudev actually speaking about things that we Hare Krishnas don't even think are topics that are worth speaking about, but he would talk about them, you know, and he would argue with us. I remember one simple argument he had, you know, he said, you know, the problem with you Indians is that you say one thing and you do the other. There's a nice English word for that he used, you know. And I said, no, but that's your problem, Gurudev. That's the problem of you who are not Indians. That's what I said to him. We had a nice argument about it, but he liked that. He liked us to speak our hearts, not just to accept something because he's saying it. We can question, we can ask the question. He will answer, he will argue with us. And even if you walk away thinking I was not convinced, he's fine with that. But ultimately you will realize that actually what he said was right. It wasn't wrong like that. And so I think that one of the things that we all can take away, and especially those who didn't meet, of course for all of us, is this idea of, well, I didn't have enough time with Gurudev. I wish I had more time. He passed away untimely. How many of us feel that he left untimely? I wasn't ready for him to leave, and he left. And now we have to deal with the situation. Fortunately for us, he left behind so many wonderful God brothers and God sisters who actually show us so much love. Sometimes even more love we feel from them than we feel from our own spiritual master, like that. And you know, but these are all expansions. These are all expansions of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, through his disciples, are actually showing us love. And Prabhupada himself is an expansion of his spiritual master, like that all the way back to Krishna. So I wanted to say this as a closing, that we should all feel very encouraged, as Maharaj said, totally encouraged, totally enthused, and preach boldly, very boldly, be fully convinced that Gurudev is always with us, that Prabhupada is always with us, that all the God brothers and God sisters are always with us, the deities are always with us, they're always in our heart. Prabhupada defines the word Paramatma as Krishna, the spiritual master, and their associates sitting in our heart. So how nice is that? That's such a wonderful definition of Paramatma. So be convinced that that is true, and know that no one loves you more than Guru and Krishna. No one loves you more than Guru and Krishna. And that Gurudev and Krishna love, Guru and Krishna love everybody like that. The whole passing away of Mother Kirtada in Dallas was for this reason. This question is asked to Gurudev. Gurudev, you love Mother Kirtada so much, it's obvious. He would lie next to her, he would massage her, he would say the sweetest words to her, he would even kiss her on the face. I mean, do things that we would think, why would a sannyasi do this with a woman? Like that. And we may have doubts and questions, but he had no doubts and questions. He had pure love for Mother Kirtada. And we were so fortunate to see that. And so one of our devotees very nicely asked this question. We were in Houston and he was giving his final lectures. You might remember the 6 final lectures he gave, which we called as final instructions, and of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And there, one very nice Mataji asked the question of Gurudev. Gurudev, you love Mother Kirtada so much, but do you love us as much as you love Mother Kirtada? And his answer was, I love all my disciples as much as I love Mother Kirtada. I love all my disciples. And not only all my disciples, I love everyone who wants to have any connection with me as much as I love Mother Kirtada. How nice is that? Even if you're not a disciple, if you just say to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I love you, he will love you as much as he loves anybody and everybody that he loved so dearly, who did so much service for him, who loved him so very much. So let's do that. Let's have that in our hearts. Be fully convinced about that and boldly march forward and touch other people's lives so that they may come to know Guru and Krishna. They may come to know Krishna consciousness, and then they can become like we, the happiest people in the world, the happy Haris. We become the happy Haris because we met the devotees, and the devotees are the best. And serving the devotees is the best thing that anybody can do. That you can never please Krishna by serving him or serving any of his associates as much as you serving a devotee. And especially those who are not yet devotees. They are devotees, but they don't know it yet. And if we touch them and they in any way become encouraged to become a devotee, then we would have actually done the greatest service on the planet, encouraging someone to become a devotee. And so, of course, as you know, I am a yakker. I like to yak a lot, and I'm a yapper. And I can yap away for the rest of creation and not feel tired, not have any lunch, not sleep and anything. I can do that. That's one of my bad qualities, but it's a good quality. Gurudev actually said You got the gift of the gab, use it for Krishna's service. You know. So anyway, but I want to actually really recognize those devotees who work very hard behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes, who actually made this program very successful. And so because I'm always guided by those who lead me, and in this case, Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu is leading me in this program. He is the one who asked me to do this service, and he is the one who first told me about the fact that we were going to do this program. And so he actually it's from his heart that I'm speaking. It is like Radharani. Whenever Radharani's devotee or associate, when Radharani asks any of his associates, please tell us about something to do with Krishna, like say, please tell us what happened at the time of the lifting of Govardhan Hill. The first thing those devotees will say to Radharani, oh Radharani, you know everything. Please reveal in my heart what you know so that I can speak. So in the same way, I'm only revealing what came from the heart of Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu. And I'm repeating those because I know that those are the best things to say. So he first wanted to thank, and we all want to thank the MCs, Mother Nandini Prabhu, who is here, we can see her at the present time. Mother Rati Manjari, who is also, I saw her, I don't see her right now because unfortunately my screen is now filled with me, looking at myself. And then also Mother Jayashree Radhe, who was actually the was the Master of Ceremonies today. And so from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, all of you, for wonderfully taking part in this program, leading this program, doing all that you did for the pleasure of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, and for the pleasure of all of us, and the pleasure of course, all of his wonderful God brothers and God sisters who came on, who I could tell were becoming enlivened being on this program, feeling personally enlivened, feeling the presence of Gurudev and Prabhupada like that, actually of the deities as well, doing this program. And then, of course, for the Zoom program that we have, we'd like to say a great thanks to the School of Bhakti for providing their Zoom account from the Bhakti Vedanta Manor in London, which is, of course, one of our premier temples, as we know, one of the best temples in the world. And thank you very much for allowing us the process, the Zoom process that we're on. And on the technical side, two wonderful devotees have been named, Siddhartha Prabhu and Jagannath Sharan Prabhu. So thank you so very much. Please, your hands up there, nice. Thank you so very, very much for the technical side. Pretty much there were very few glitches that I know of. And I'm sure that you saw more glitches than we did, because sometimes, you know, behind the scenes, you get to see things that you don't get to see when you're in front of the scenes, you know, like that. So, and then on the promotion side, very importantly, two very important devotees, Madan Mohini Mataji and her sister Aishwarya Mataji, who both actually do a lot behind the scenes for the TKG Sangha. Neither of them are direct disciples of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, but are a very good example of how anybody can have a connection with Tamal Krishna Maharaj and probably even feel his presence more than others who do have a direct connection with him as, you know, disciples, first, second, third, or whatever, a number of initiations they were given, etc. So thank you so very much to the both of you for all the promotions that you did. And of course, the wonderful poster that came out, there's a wonderful devotee, his name is Balanimai Prabhu, who actually designed the poster and made the poster happen. We thank you also very much. And of course, last but not least, most importantly, today is the happy appearance day of Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu. Let's all put our hands together and wish him well and say happy birthday to you and Hare Krishna to you. Thank you so very much for coming into our lives. We're actually, truth be told, we're actually from the same Kunja in Golok Vrindavan, in the original planet Golok Vrindavan. We're from the same Kunja. That's why we've come back together in this life, to be together. So we're intimately related with one another. We're all true family of one another. And if we just show love within the family, charity begins at home. And if we can show the love at home, then we can show the love outside the home. If we can't show it inside the home, it's never going to come outside the home. And you are inside the home, a very important player in our home, Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu. We thank you so very much for everything you have done. We wish you all the best in your lives. And if there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to let us know. your happiness is our genuine treasure. And of course, truthfully speaking, all of your happinesses is my and our genuine treasure. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. And that pretty much concludes our weekend of the life and times of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and I'm so grateful that I was asked to host yesterday's second session and today's second session. And it's absolutely wonderful, and I look forward to more of these types of weekends, as well as to just take advantage of the recordings forever and ever. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai. Mancha Patitanam Pavanebhyo.
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Jai. Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki
Jai.
Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Hari.